Now it should be working.
We are now on the opening slide, fasting, a
Oh, right.
contemporary journey.
So, okay, fasting, a contemporary journey. I want to welcome everybody to this third and final session of this class. I remember when I told David I wanted to talk about fasting and that I could fill 3 one-hour sessions, thinking, Anne, what did you just commit to do? And of course, this was about the same as telling somebody many years ago that I would teach a 40-hour seminar in classical guitar and music theory, forgetting that I would have to teach the whole thing in Spanish. And so it's this kind of impulsive, yes, of course I'll do it thing. And so here we've come to the end, to the final session. And what I want to do in this session is kind of try to tie together some things that got left at loose ends. So the first thing that I want to highlight is the characteristics of a conversation. So when we talk about building something, what we mean is we're building an edifice or a final product whose individual components are still recognizable. And this is true of almost all conversations. And last week I demonstrated that. But conversations have a common vocabulary. They have clear and recognizable signals that stage them, and they have those stages and phases. And so I want to start off with this week's 3 vocabulary words. They're not nearly as awe-inspiring as the other weeks have been, but they're important ones. And the first one is therapeutic. So what does it mean when we say something is therapeutic? Just get home, write down your associations. Second one is holistic. So what do you think about when you hear that word? I can tell you that I hear it slightly differently than the word is written. And that kind of plays with my idea of its etymology a little bit, but it's an interesting word. And finally, we all think we know what this means, but what does the word medical actually mean? And so these words are going to play an important part in today's session. So if you guys recall, I told my tragic story of my first M&M.
I heard you laugh when Mother Carolus said she hated
Oh, I
M&M.
almost lost it. Yeah. So this is where my conversation with food got abrogated. And to tell you a little bit about why I was aware this was a conversation, I've been fascinated by the Song of Generations since I was 6 years old. The passing down of physical traits from parent to child, and watching how those traits interact with the environment. And particularly if you grow up a botanist, you can water a plant and you see an almost instant response. So this always struck me as a conversation, right? The plant's body is looking for something, the environment reaches out and provides it, the environment provides it, and the body responds. It always struck me as that. And then as I watched my own progress with food, I became aware that there was a conversation going on and other people were having it successfully, and I was missing it entirely. And so imagine my interest to suddenly, come on this scripture, and this is the one from Luke. It says, and here God saying, "Blessed are those who are hungry now, for they shall be satisfied." Well, by the time I was 25, I think 1 meal in 10 actually left me feeling satisfied. And I was pretty desperate. And I knew there had to be this 3-way conversation between food and God, because God created the food after all, and between food and me, myself, body, mind, and spirit, and between me and God, And if you noticed in that previous slide, God was nowhere in that picture. Not a bit. And so I wanted to restore God to that picture. And this was where I came into the practice of fasting. Somewhere I had 4 stages. Is that the next slide? Or did I skip that slide?
You think you skipped it because
skipped
next
it.
is a model fast.
Yeah, okay. Next is the one. I apologize. Let me review the 4 stages briefly. Initiation, maintenance, breaking, and oh, you know what? No, it's not. Okay, so this is the model fast. This is the story of Jesus fast. I know where it is now. This is the story of the Jesus fast. Told in the Bible 3 times. Goes into detail about all the events that happened during the fast, which is not typical of, most fasts in the Bible. They just say he fasted 40 days and 40 nights. End of discussion. Because everybody in the Bible fasted, but the Jesus fast is what we do. And in that fast, you do see the 4 stages, and I believe that is the next slide.
Yes.
Okay. Did I mention, or I'm slightly distracted this week? So we see the 4 stages. And in the past session, I highlighted those stages against the store model, a graphic description of the model of the Jesus fast. With his initiation here, he gets driven by the Spirit into the wilderness, and his maintenance going out 40 days. And then he gets hungry because he's burned up everything he has in stores. And then the devil tempts him. What a breaking phase that was. Not sure I want to attempt it. And then finally, termination, which is the return to normal eating. And the point I made is that under this system, all fasts are created equal. Now, this is the maintenance rules one, right? Here.
This is the question. What is a fast?
Yeah, what is a fast? All right, this is important. So we're going to go through a few things, and I want you guys to tell me whether you think these things are fasts. So the first one is a hunger strike. Do you think that is a fast? The way we've defined it here.
It has a purpose.
It does, absolutely.
It doesn't necessarily have a communication component, though.
That is absolutely true, except sort of as a political action. Go on. What else?
Well, it certainly has a beginning and an ending.
It doesn't have a defined ending.
Well, it could.
It could if we're fasting to get something to change.
But
Yeah, it might be,
then-
it's not a specified number of days, but an
Yeah.
event would be signal the end.
Yeah, but it's an external event that signals the end. What you want in your fast is, be it whether it comes to its natural end, as Jesus fast did, or whether whether you come to the end of your planned days, as most of mine have done, you want it to come from you. You want to have autonomy over it. And in a hunger strike, you don't. It's a political action, and there are a few other reasons why I disqualify hunger strikes from my rank of things that are called fasts. But you could, with all of these, impose the Jesus fast model on it. But in order to do that with a hunger fast, with a hunger strike, you'd have to quit when your planned days are over, whether the hunger strike achieved its goal or not. And that's why that one is hard. Next is deprivation of food, e.g. from a famine.
No.
No, is that the?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what you have, but no, that's not a fast.
What the rest do you think?
You don't have any control over it.
No, it's a forced fast. There's no food, so you can't eat.
Uh-huh.
And there's no specific end.
No.
You're right. But what I think people did, so we haven't seen in this country nationwide food scarcity. And I'm not talking here about, people who can't afford to buy food and thus are hungry or anything like that. I'm talking about You go to the first grocery store and whatever it is you want isn't there. You go to the second grocery store, whatever you want isn't there. And in addition, the government gets so desperate that it imposes rationing. We haven't seen that since World War II. So most of us have no idea about what that kind of scarcity looks like. But what the people in the Bible did is there were predictable cycles of food scarcity. So you'd come off the harvest, you'd go and eat abundantly for a while, and then winter would come and you'd gradually run down your stores. And in the spring, just about now, would be when food was at its most scarce. You haven't got in your early vegetables and you haven't done the spring planting yet. And that's when we do our Lenten fast. And so you can impose a fasting narrative on it, but in and of itself, no, it's not a fast. Next one is,
It's interesting that it overlaps with our
Lent?
Lent.
yeah,
I don't think it's interesting. I think it's,
Coincidence.
I think it's quite deliberate.
yeah, I think it's deliberate, yeah.
Yeah. And so now we come to something else, and this is depletion as for an athletic event. Is this a fast?
What do you mean?
So this depletion is where an athlete will deprive him or herself of certain kinds of food so that he or she will be mostly muscle and will lose most of his or her body fat. So it's often done with Ironman events and other such endurance events so that you have muscle and you're not carrying around any excess body fat. Is that a fast?
More of a diet, isn't it?
Thank you. Yeah, it's absolutely a diet.
Well, it has a purpose. It
It has
has
a
a beginning,
purpose.
it has a beginning and an end. It has
does
a
not-
breaking,
yeah.
it has all of the elements.
Yeah, but it has a prescriptive health outcome. And the ending may be the event itself, but again, it's kind of an externally imposed ending. It's like the hunger strike in that thing. Now, having said that, you can superimpose your, fasting stages on it and make it a spiritual fast. And I'd argue that's a good thing to do. If only because spiritual fasting improves your body awareness. Part of the techniques that I've been trying to emphasize here have had to do with listening to your body. Why do I insist on a breaking phase in a short fast, even though David Fung and great fasting gurus like him say, oh, that's poppycock? The reason I insist on it is because that's the time to listen to your body respond to the food you eat. That's what you do. The same reason as you don't stop a conversation just because you're mad. You stay around, you listen to it, and then you bring it to a gentle end. That's what breaking does. And it's the greatest time in the world to be aware of what your body's doing. That's why we do it. Next one, I think, is medical abstinence, medical food deprivation as a side effect of treatment. Isn't that the one?
Yep.
This one? Yeah. Okay, I will just state for the record that my answer to this one is different now than it was before. So probably most of you don't remember that in 2018 or 15 rather, Ash Wednesday was on February 18. But I remember it because the day after February 18 was my first chemotherapy treatment for breast cancer. And it was an odd experience because I saw this room with this IV pump in it and all this equipment in it. And my body saw, this is the day after Ash Wednesday. We didn't eat anything on Ash Wednesday. Why should the day be different? And my body slid into this 18-day fast, which was mostly a total abstinence fast. It wasn't quite total abstinence because I was not going to keep that rule deliberately, but it was awfully doggone close. And I just let my body do what it felt called to do. I said the initiation prayer that my body told me I ought to say, and did all of this stuff. And at the end of the 18 days, I started to try and eat again. And interestingly, over the next, I think my chemo finally ended in June, late June. And over the next months, I was able to taste sweet and sour and umami for a while, and then nothing, and then sweet and sour and umami and salt. I ate things like hummus and tomatoes and homemade chicken broth and olives and peppers. It's bizarre variety of food. And I remember going in and the doctor's asking me why I'm eating and I'm giving her this list. And she said, why is it that you can keep this down and none of my other patients can? Because it's breaking things and I'm really trying hard to listen to my body's response to everything I eat. And I may be only getting down 850 or 900 calories a day, but they are nutrient. And the chemotherapy, I went to see the nutritionist, and I had this list of foods that I could now taste. And I said, she started to reel off the recommendations. I said, but wait a minute. I said, before we do that, I want to know what nutrients these foods have in common. And so we put them in a nutrition guide. And she said, well, let's see, zinc, phosphorus, magnesium, manganese, copper. And I'm sick, and by this point I'm in tears because the nutritionist has forgotten most of her biochemistry, but I haven't. All of those are essential cell rebuilding cofactors. And then the nutritionist says, and you're looking for protein wherever you can get it. And at that point I lost it because God in his goodness had guided my body through that entire fast an ungodly long breaking phase. That one's one for the Guinness Book of World Records of breaking phases. And he had helped me get what my body needed. That's when I became aware that yes, this really is a conversation and it's worthwhile learning how to keep it. Now we come to the final one. I think David's actually going to experience this one pretty soon, right?
Oh, boy.
Yeah, so this is the one I told you about last week. So is this a fast?
Not really. I mean, it's not a spiritual fast. I mean, it could be, I suppose.
It could be. Lord, please protect my hand. Please help me from me. Yeah, it could be. And all you have to do to make it a fast by my rules is when you get out of surgery and you're in recovery, think of chipped ice as you're breaking. And I think I told this story last time when we first moved here. I had that minor surgery for a medical issue. And they did it under general anesthetic. And it wasn't much general anesthetic, but they still insisted on this whole rigmarole. And so I did the whole rigmarole, including a little, Lord, help me through this initiation prayer. And I went through the surgery and I got out and I'm in the recovery room and they give me this cup of chipped ice. And so I carefully start in on the chipped ice, listening very carefully to what my body is saying. Doing it slowly, chewing on it finally, and swallowing and chewing on more of it. And I finished the cup and I wait about 5 minutes. Finally, I look at Scott and say, Scott, where are the pizza and the mashed potatoes? Because my body had seen that as thank you. That's a breaking signal. And we are on to termination by the fastest, most quick possible route. And that has been my pattern from surgery ever since. Now,
Mashed potatoes and pizza?
no, mostly now it's salmon and other such things. I typically order the biggest salmon dinner I can find and eat the whole thing. The nurses walk in and look at it and go, huh? Really? Okay. Yeah. so you can, and I did eventually train my body to recognize that breaking phase and hear it as, okay, it is now safe. Say a gentle goodbye to the fast and go on to resume normal eating. I had a voice teacher who said, the mind is the master of the body. And so in the things that I am teaching, what I'm hoping people will do is absolutely engage in prayer, actively in prayer, because nothing brings you to God's attention like fasting and praying together. But also engaging in listening to people. That is a knack you develop it will be huge rewards. Actually, there's scientific evidence to that effect now. Next slide is maintenance rules, I believe. Isn't that?
Yep.
Yep. So 2 types of maintenance rules. Because I'm teaching in a church and lots of you guys have families, I was teaching about maintenance rules and giving examples where they met the 3 criteria, which is they were simple, they were challenging, and they were revealing about self and so forth, but they were calorie and nutrient neutral. You can impose, and many people do for their fast, maintenance rules that are calorie and nutrient restricted. There are 4 groups of people who should not do this. Is that the next slide? It's not, you just see them, right?
Yes.
Yeah, 4 groups of people who should not do this without a doctor's supervision. And I thus would not advise that anyone do this because I don't know anybody's health status and I'm not a doctor, at least not that. But the 4 groups of people generally who should not engage in particularly calorie restricted maintenance rules are children under 18, pregnant women, nursing mothers, and anybody that's got a pre-existing health condition that's metabolically based. That would include type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, gout, any of the metabolic diseases we've discussed before. Those you really have to get a doctor's advice if you want to do rigorous maintenance rules. But as you've seen, you don't have to do the calorie restricted, nutrient poor maintenance rules to get the benefits of a spiritual conversation with God about food. So now we're going to go on, and I think what we're on this teaching children about fasting. That's the
Yes.
next one, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So far, so good, Steve. So teaching the children about fasting. This I wanted to do last week and didn't have time. So remember that in this practice, if you follow the phases, all fasts are created. This is important because your children cannot do the very restrictive maintenance rules. And there are several reasons for this. The pregnant women and nursing moms is obvious. You're eating and feeding 2. And so depriving 2 of food is worse than depriving 1. But the reason behind children is just that their emotional response is different. Their nutritional needs are much greater. A child can go into malnourishment much more quickly than your average adult because they're still growing, right? So, and yet here I am teaching children about fasting. So, if you want to do this, fast alongside of your child. And I encourage people, if you're doing that, to give to choose a non-restrictive maintenance rule so that your child can watch it as an example of something he or she can do next year. Go through initiation together, talk about it. Talk about what they expect. You know, what's it like to give up something you really like? It's gonna make you hungry or anything, but you're gonna notice it, right? So, next one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can I ask a question? fasting doesn't have to be about abstaining from food. It can, I mean, especially if you're working with a child, can it be abstaining from some other activity?
I would not do it that way.
Okay.
Now, let me explain to you why. People do ask me this question. Thank you for reading it to me. It will actually become part of my opening intro. We did not come of evolutionary age in a consistent food supply. Historically, food supplies cycle from very abundant to very scarce, and our bodies have adapted by developing ways of dealing with that. So we actually have very sophisticated storage system in our bodies for conserving the essential amino acids that we cannot synthesize ourselves. We conserve energy, we conserve ions, electrolytes, all of those things, so that in times of food scarcity, we can survive. And this is how we survived as a species. If we didn't have that, we would not actually be around. Unfortunately, what we live in now is for the first time in history, a consistently replete food supply. And our bodies minds, which are used to dealing with contrasts and eating cycle and so forth, and our body's storage systems need to be told they are still valid and they matter. And even if you don't keep a restricted maintenance rule, even if it's just, dropping sweeteners and calories from your liquids, you may make that up in what you eat so that the rule is calorie neutral, but you'll notice it. And that is a signal to your body. And your mind can teach your body to recognize that as a signal that we're not actually living in a completely consistent food supply. So that's why fasting being about food matters. There are plenty of other disciplines out there about, restricting activities. If you want to, say, spend Lent following a modified Benedictine rule, that has a fasting component usually, but it also has the simplicity component. So the discipline of simplicity is one of the disciplines recommended by or recognized by Richard Foster in his beautiful book, Celebration of Discipline, which, by the way, I would recommend to everybody. So that's my answer to that. You can disagree with me. I know there are people who do, and that's fine.
So you're really saying that the one of the principal purposes of this kind of fast is having not only a conversation with God, but having a conversation with your body.
With your body
and the
and
focus,
with
and
food.
because the focus is on the body part, you kind of have to do something to get the body's attention, hence no
Yeah.
food or restricted food.
Well, or altered food, certainly.
Right.
Yeah, so let me give you an example. I think I shared this example last week about my friend who's type 2 diabetic, and she has this carefully kept list of foods that reliably, and I kid you not, she keeps this on a spreadsheet, reliably boost her blood sugar maybe 5 points. And she knows these foods, and she uses them because they don't affect her blood sugar level much. She's got this down to a science. Actually, there are 6, but she could give up the favorite of those 6 during Lent and just eat the other 5, and she'd still be fine, right? Because she hasn't affected that balance she's trying to maintain. But trust me on this, she will miss that 6th one. She will miss the one she gave up, and that's the point of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so next one is so fast alongside your child.
So this is the age appropriate.
Yeah, this is the age appropriate one. So this feeds into it beautifully. So as I said, choose an age appropriate maintenance rule. If you're an adult who's got type 2 diabetes and you want to engage in this kind of fasting practice, do what my friend did. Identify the foods that have a reliable response on a glucose test strip, like she did, and then you can play around with those. As long as you can delete one of them and be all right. You do have to be confident that they will act the same way individually. That's the only thing she would caution people about. So help your child to choose an age appropriate maintenance rule, and And for yourself, make sure that you've chosen one that could be an example to your child next year. So you will probably be using at this point a non-calorie restricted, non-nutrient restricted maintenance rule. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Or have I lost everybody?
No.
Okay.
Did you
We're
say the
nodding.
last part again?
Okay, so if you are fasting alongside a child, you will want to choose a maintenance rule that is not calorie restricted and is not nutrient restricted. Got it. Yeah. And I could probably put up a whole site of maintenance rules for which that's true, because I've probably tried all of them at one point or another. So the next one, if you and your child have a conflict, talk to your child and always remember to include Jesus in the conversation. Now, my mother, who is currently running the welcome desk to heaven, was a master of this. She would look at me and she'd say, "Anne, dear, I thought that you and Jesus had decided that you were going to give up Three Musketeers bars for Lent. So, there's a whole big lot of them there. I know they're right there. But I'll tell you what, we're going to finish my shopping and you and Jesus have a little talk about whether you want to continue this fast. And when you and Jesus have decided, you let me know and I'll be happy with whatever you've decided." This is the thing. Your child should be free to stop his or her fast early, as you should be. This is one of the things that I somehow obliterated in the earlier discussion. And that is that if for some reason your rule just becomes impossible to keep, it's always okay to stop it early. What's not okay is to stop it late. So if you're doing a fast for spiritual reasons during Lent and you get to Easter and it's like, gosh, this rule feels really good, stop it anyway and let your body listen to what it used to do. Compare the experiences. If I were to stop my Three Musketeers fast early, I would have to wait for a while to start another effort. That's the reality. That's what you're trying to get your body to do, is follow these cycles. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay, good. I think, is that the final one of those?
Patterns
Yes,
of
patterns of fasting.
Patterns, yes.
All right. Now, you see what I mean? This is kind of disjointed, like these are all the things that I just need to wrap up, tie a bow here. Okay, patterns of fasting. Extended fasting comes in two varieties. Variety one, restricted maintenance rule, extended fasting. These are your water fasts, your fasts where you only eat homemade bone broth, the really exotic, extremely calorie restricted, nutrient restricted fasts. These are the fasts you really should take some time with the breaking phase. Never mind what Dr. Fung says. And you should really, if you're going to do that kind of fast and you're qualified to do that kind of fast, you should really listen to your body very carefully on those. The other kind of extended fast is to do the kind we've been talking about. So these are the calorie neutral, nutrient replete maintenance rules, where you simply add some austerity to it by leaving out foods that seem luxurious, or you leave out your favorite foods, or in some way you make a sacrifice. It's just that what you don't do is deprive your body of what it needs. So those are the two kinds of extended fasting. They are longer than 3 days. So an extended fast, depending on the kind of fast it is, can go anywhere from 3 days to 40 to 50 days on a calorie neutral, nutrient replete fast. Right? But on the restricted ones, most of us will probably not go very long. Second pattern of fasting is periodic short fasting. So this is the kind of thing where you do one 36-hour fast per week, or one every other week, or something like that. So what you're doing here is you're giving your body a vacation from food. It's not very long, and most of these have a complete abstinence maintenance rule, except that you drink water and liquids. A lot of people have found these types of fast refreshing. I have been experimenting with them this Lent for a reason that has to do with scheduling. And now they finally work. It's amazing. They did it for years. But as your practice grows, so grows the number of types of fasting that you can do. Now, this last one, how many of you think you've never fasted before you? By the silence, I see that you know that's a trick question.
Yes.
Okay, so there is a fast all of us keep. It goes from the evening meal to the first meal in the morning. It's anywhere between about 10 and 14 hours, usually, depending on when, if you've got kids and you're eating dinner at 5:30 and then you don't eat breakfast again until 7, no, that's 11 hours. So it's a substantial fast. Its maintenance rule is usually, at least for part of the time, no food or water. Because most of us don't drink water when we sleep. We sleep through most of it, so it's tempting to think of that as not a fast. Wrong, but you do have to take some steps to make it a fast. Do a little initiation prayer before you go to bed. And I put a bunch of those in my last presentation. And do your little breaking phase. This is where it gets tricky. Do your breaking phase. Stumble into the kitchen in your pajamas. Eat a little bit of something that your body will see as a mild, gentle food. Sit and think about it a while. Listen to what your body says. Go take your shower. Go get dressed, and then eat the rest of breakfast. Now, I can tell you that's hard to keep. But that's how you do it.
Why is it hard to keep?
Well, it would be easy to keep with the food that I really liked. I could make myself, but it's hard to keep because your spouse or whatever may have trouble following it. It also has a tendency to lengthen the time it takes to get out the door. I discovered this the hard way, actually. And so, yeah, it's a little hard to keep. Well, you will find, unless you're just a genius scheduler, which I am not, you will find that one actually is a challenge. Now, daily intermittent fasting is an expansion of that daily fast to be anywhere between 16 and 20 hours. That one is pretty possible for a lot of people to keep, but not if they're on any like insulin or scheduled medication. It can be kind of an interesting thing. And if you're going to do daily intermittent fasting, then what you want to do is keep what I call a season of fasts, which is the last one there. Season of fasts means that you can take your daily intermittent fast, which you've undertaken for therapeutic or health prescriptive reasons. Okay, what is that called? Health prescriptive reasons? Diet. Thank you. I love it when people are quick on the uptake. Okay, so you put your intermittent fast into the dietary rule thing. What you do for Lent, if you want to keep your intermittent fasts, is you open a season of fasts for 40 days. I actually did something to mine. I simply flipped mine 180 degrees, and you do your Ash Wednesday service, you do your Ash Wednesday prayers as your initiation, and then you go on and you do kind of in miniature apply your 4 stages. So you do your break, you try to wait half an hour before you eat the rest of the meal, and you know, go on doing that for the 40 days. And that will turn your dietary rule into a spiritual pattern of intermittent fasting for the season of Lent. Does that make sense? Or have I completely lost you? Okay, the next slide is what?
Therapeutic
There-
versus.
Yeah, yes, we just got into that. Therapeutic versus spiritual fasting. Therapeutic fasting has a prescriptive health outcome. What do we call that? I think the next slide states it. We call it a diet or a dietary rule. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Why am I making a big deal about this? Anybody got a guess why I'm making a big deal out of this?
Well, you've lost the conversation part.
Exactly. So if you are doing the intermittent fasting for nothing but physical rules, you've lost the conversation. And yet, we need the conversation. So it does matter that you keep your spiritual fasting to fasting. And I say, I think in one of those slides that, look, a dietary period of ordered temporary abstinence from food can be part of a diet. That's fine. What you don't want is for a new diet to be your fast maintenance rule. That does not work. It's too complicated and you'll lose the conversation, right? How annoying is it if you get somebody who gets up and just yatters away, la 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 la, about everything under the sun, and you're standing there going, am I even in this room? Yeah. Okay, next is
Therapeutic fast can be part of diets.
yeah, that's right. So I just went through that one.
Oh, okay, then
Then next one is,
keeping safe and rewarding.
yeah, okay, this one. So I've got a bunch of rules up there. You want, for your spiritual fasts, you want not to stack them on top of each other. So I'm going to keep my flipped schedule until Easter Eve, and then it's going away for a good long time. While I figure out whether my body actually ever likes or needs that schedule again, except as a sacrificial fast, because it's much harder to keep. You want there to be, for spiritual fasting, you want there to be a distinct difference between fasting over here, diet in the middle, la 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 la, daily eating, termination, diet, and feasting over here. God ordained these 3 disciplines, and we really should keep them as separate disciplines. And if we do food abstinence as part of a diet, which is perfectly therapeutic and wonderful to do, but if we do it, we should be clear whether we're doing it as a spiritual fast or whether we're keeping it as a dietary rule. For 325 days of the year, I keep my intermittent fast as a dietary rule. For 40 days of the year during Lent, I try to keep them spiritually as well. Let's see, I think the next one is
Eating disorders.
eating disorders. Okay, I have to talk about this one. Fasting does not cause eating disorders. There are 3 basic eating disorders: binge eating disorder, which is what I have; anorexia nervosa, which is compulsive self-starvation; and bulimia. None of these belong anywhere in spiritual fasting. The reason we're so picky about children and teenagers not using restricted maintenance rules has a lot to do with the bind you can get into if you go on, say, a water-only fast and you get euphoric, there's a lot of evidence out there that says that teenagers experience emotions more intensely and less stably than adults do. And if you get into that euphoric state and you decide, because you have no discipline, because you're an adolescent, and I mean, come on, I did stupid things when I was a teenager, right? Lots of them. If you do that and you extend your fast and then you try to break it, and now your body's all over the doggone place and you get sick because you're trying to eat too fast, you go into it again, you can see how this cycle could easily spiral out of control. Is there evidence that that happens? It'd be hard to tell, because by the time most people get into treatment for any of these disorders, especially the lower two, they're well on into a psychiatric disorder. I'm not sure that eating disorders necessarily start out that way, but if you're hiding your eating habits from parents and you're lying compulsively and you've now gone into this control psychosis where you have to control everything you do, come on, that needs therapy usually. And this is why in my Keep It Safe and Rewarding, there are a bunch of rules that really are designed so that you don't turn your fasting state into a constant thing. So even my intermittent dietary rule, my intermittent fasting dietary rule, the rest of the year I include flavored coffees in that. I include flavored seltzer waters in that. The only thing I drink on the Lenten regime is cinnamon coffee, or cinnamon tea rather, and unflavored coffee, coffee, right? Not chocolate vanilla coffee or anything like that. So there's a little bit of austerity to it. So we are back, I believe,
To your list of,
my list of vocabulary words.
well, of the restricted maintenance rules should not apply.
Yeah. Oh, those 4 things. I put that slide in here because it bears repeating.
I was gonna say, we saw this already.
Right, we did see this already. But the reason it's relevant is how it interacts with why teenagers are so vulnerable to the eating disorders. And so teenagers and children especially should not fast. Pregnant women and nursing mothers, that one makes sense, right? Because they're eating for 2. And medical conditions, you'll know if you've got a medical condition that precludes restricted maintenance rules. And finally, next, we have
The words.
the
yes.
words. So I realized that I'm talking about spiritual fasting, but I'm also talking about a very holistic conversational style of fasting. And so the word holistic means essentially all of one piece. It's an interaction. And if you actually go out and read the science and get dizzy as they spin through the metabolic pathways, you'll understand that it really is a conversation between your body and your body's different parts and your body's senses and your noggin. And it is a conversation and involving God in it, of course, makes it spiritual. So there's your holistic. Therapeutic means that it's healing with a prescriptive outcome, usually. Although therapeutic used as an adjective doesn't always have that meaning. If you call someone a therapist, they're after prescriptive outcomes. But if you call somebody, say, a therapeutic something or other, they're after a generalized sense of healing and well-being. And finally, medical. That's actually a specific model that involves pharmaceuticals. So those are the 3 words. And finally, some discussion.
So here are some questions for discussion.
Yeah. Oops,
What is the role of
That's-
sacrifice
that's the
in
wrong
keeping the Holy
slideshow.
Lent? Why is the withholding of
Well, that
food
Was
so
on the slide.
important
What happened
in
there?
I don't
Lenten
know.
celebrations? And finally, is it possible to keep Lent without fasting?
That was from last week's lecture.
Yes, but it doesn't match the question, so,
Oh,
so somehow it was edited in, I guess.
Well, you gave us those words last time and we were supposed to come up with
yeah, I did, but they were different words. Huh,
sacrifice, abstinence, and austerity. were
yeah, the words
that-
last time, yeah. These
Mhm.
words are different.
Mhm.
That's
I could
weird.
go back,
Let's see.
therapeutic, holistic, and medical, this was the
Yeah,
last
but
slide.
go to the discussion questions. Does that bring up the
They'll bring up the,
voiceover?
yes,
I can silence that.
No, the problem is they're the wrong questions.
No, they weren't the wrong questions.
Oh, the voiceover
the
doesn't match.
voiceover was.
Yeah,
didn't
the
match.
right, go to the questions and he can just mute it.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
I have no idea how that happened.
Questions are
So
what
here are some
distinguishes,
questions for discussion.
Okay,
what distinguishes spiritual fasting from so-called therapeutic fasting?
right. So
That's the question for
yeah,
today.
that's one of the questions for today. And then the other ones, what do you think the benefits of spiritual fasting might be versus the prescriptive benefits of, say, keeping fasting as a dietary rule?
Well, you're having that conversation with
Yeah.
God.
Well, you're having a conversation with your body
Uh-huh.
because you're paying
That's right.
attention. You're not just doing it out of a sense of obligation or, some prescription that the doctors
Exactly.
do. It's a choice.
Yes. And the other thing for me, I have to tell you that I sort of obey dietary fasting rules kind of on autopilot. But if you're doing it as a spiritual fast, it becomes nearly impossible to do that because you need to follow the phases. So you do your initiation and go, okay, now I'm in maintenance. What do I think about that? Right. And so you come to this grinding halt in the middle of, beautiful workout. Wow, I'm working out. I'm still in maintenance. What do I really think about that? What's God telling me? It's a very deliberate thing. The benefit to spiritual fasting, they're basically you're free. Number one, participation. Under the rules that I've established here, pretty nearly everybody can do something in the way of ordered temporary abstinence from some food. Doesn't have to be, hugely restricted, but you do something, and that will open up the conversation with your body. So that's the thing. One thing, conversation with your body is a big, huge second thing. And the third one is just trusting God. Because if you try to do nearly anything for 40 days that you're not used to, you're going to have some difficult times. And that's the time where you just say, hey, Lord, help. And he's there. Okay, and the third question, remind me of the third question.
therapeutic or medical
Yeah.
fasts.
So
Sure.
therapeutic and medical fasts, you keep the way your doctor orders you to keep them. If you want to impose a spiritual narrative on them, you can do so by, doing your initiation prayer, recognizing the different phase of the spirit, the holistic spiritual fast that you are in, and keeping the breaking and termination phases. And you can have a nice little fast. And sometimes, as it happened with me in chemo, it can be really important, actually. I think I hold the world's record. I think I failed exactly once during 20 weeks of chemo. Wow. Yeah. It wasn't easy, but, I was used by that point to listen to exactly what my body was saying. So that is the end. What time are we up to? You were right.
Just
Well,
about
30.
12:30.
I'm good. What can I say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Thank
for-
you.
Thank you for joining me in this. I really
Thank you for presenting.
What was
Yeah.
the name of the, who was the author of the book Celebration of Discipline?
That is Richard Foster. And I will try over the next 2 weeks to gather some of my other resources on fasting. There is a book called The Complete Book of Fasting. It's not complete. It's about therapeutic fasting. And he doesn't say a lot about spiritual fasting. His numbers will make you dizzy. They make you dizzy listening to them. But he has some good things to say. We agree on many points. We don't agree on all points. He practices some of his extremely restricted maintenance rules in a way that would drive my wife crazy. But he is a big, famous MD with a huge practice, and I'm just one. So,
Okay, great. Thank you so
you.
much.
yeah,
Yes.
thank you guys for coming.